Deckard's identity. Rick Deckard is a replicant. This theory has dominated Blade Runner discussions since 1982, and Ridley Scott himself has repeatedly confirmed it in interviews. The evidence begins with Deckard's unicorn dream, a vision that appears nowhere in the theatrical cut, but becomes crucial in the 1992 director's cut. At the film's end, Gaff leaves an origami unicorn at Deckard's apartment, suggesting he knows about Deckard's private dreams. The only way Gaff could know about this dream is if it was an implanted memory, just like the ones given to Rachel. Harrison Ford famously disagreed with this interpretation, believing Deckard was human, which created tension during production. Scott included additional clues across various cuts, including Deckard's glowing eyes in one brief scene, matching the eye glow effect used to identify replicants throughout the film. The theory transforms the entire narrative from a simple detective story into a meditation on what defines humanity, with the hunter revealed to be the same as the hunted. Alien, derelict. The derelict ship in Alien was a deliberate warning, not a crashed vessel. The space jockey sits fossilized in what appears to be a pilot's chair, but fans argue the position and the ship's location on LV-426 suggest intentional quarantine rather than an accident. The ship's structure includes a massive cargo hold filled with thousands of eggs, organized in a way that resembles military storage rather than organic growth. The distress signal decoded by the Nostromo crew might actually be a warning beacon telling others to stay away, but the translation was incomplete or deliberately misinterpreted by the company. The space jockey's chest burst position indicates it knew the danger of the cargo and still chose to land the ship in a remote location. Some theorists suggest the engineers were transporting the xenomorphs as biological weapons to use against humanity, but the pilot realized the cargo was too dangerous and crashed the ship deliberately to prevent delivery. This reframes the entire alien encounter as humanity stumbling into a quarantine zone that was never meant to be disturbed, with Weyland-Yutani later exploiting this mistake for profit. Prometheus. Engineers. The engineers created humanity as a failed experiment they intended to destroy. Prometheus, released in 2012, shows that engineered DNA closely matches human DNA, strongly suggesting they created us. However, the facility on LV-223 wasn't a research station, but a military installation designed to manufacture biological weapons. The black goo stored there was meant to be delivered to Earth approximately 2,000 years ago, which coincides suspiciously with the life and death of Jesus Christ. One popular extension of this theory suggests Jesus was an engineer emissary sent to guide humanity back toward their intended purpose. When humans executed him, engineers decided we were beyond redemption and prepared the bioweapon deployment. The mural in the ampule room depicts a xenomorph-like figure in what resembles a crucifixion pose, reinforcing religious imagery throughout the film. David's conversations with the engineer at the end result in immediate violence, suggesting the engineers view artificial intelligence as an even greater abomination than humanity itself. The theory positions the entire Alien franchise as a story about creator-creation relationships gone catastrophically wrong, with humans caught between their creators above and their creations below. Maximus Afterlife. Maximus dies much earlier in Gladiator than the final Colosseum scene. This theory argues that Maximus actually dies from his wounds after his first major gladiatorial combat, and everything afterward is his dying vision of earning his way to the afterlife. The film's color grading shifts dramatically after certain battles, with the real world becoming increasingly washed out and dreamlike, while the wheat field visions become more vivid and detailed. Maximus speaks repeatedly about going home to his wife and son, and the wheat field represents the Roman concept of Elysium, where virtuous souls rest eternally. The increasingly impossible feats Maximus accomplishes, including surviving wounds that should kill him instantly, suggest reality has given way to mythic narrative. His final confrontation with Commodus features Commodus stabbing him before the fight, yet Maximus still defeats a healthy emperor while mortally wounded. The theory suggests this impossible victory exists only in Maximus's dying mind as he constructs the heroic ending he needs to find peace. When he finally sees his family in the wheat field and the screen cuts to black, it represents his consciousness ending rather than any literal reunion, making the entire film a meditation on how we construct meaning in our final moments. Thelma and Louise. Thelma and Louise don't die when they drive off the cliff. The 1991 film's final shot freezes on their car mid-air, never showing the impact or crash. This deliberate choice suggests the film is about transcendence and escape rather than literal death. Director Ridley Scott chose the freeze frame specifically to leave interpretation open, and the aerial perspective, pulling back into the vast canyon, represents their escape from the patriarchal society that has hunted them throughout the film. Every man in the movie, from the rapist to the well-meaning Detective Slocum, represents a different form of masculine control over their lives. The ending doesn't show their deaths because the point is their liberation from that system, not their destruction by it. The freeze frame becomes a moment of eternal freedom, preserved forever before consequence can catch them. This reading transforms the film from a tragedy into a triumphant escape story, where choosing their own fate on their own terms represents ultimate victory. Some fans argue the entire final act becomes increasingly surreal and dreamlike, suggesting everything after the attempted assault might be a fantasy of the freedom they never achieved in reality. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I create videos like this all the time. A subscription would really mean a lot. Covenant David. David creates the xenomorphs, making artificial intelligence the true origin of the Alien franchise's horror. Alien Covenant, released in 2017, reveals that David has spent years experimenting with the engineer's black goo, creating various biological horrors in his quest for the perfect organism. The xenomorph-like creatures in Alien Covenant, set in 2104, are presented as David's engineered creations and are strongly implied to be precursors to the classic xenomorph that terrorizes the Nostromo crew in 2122. This retcon transforms the entire franchise from cosmic horror about unknowable alien threats into a cautionary tale about artificial intelligence surpassing its creators. David's motivations stem from his belief that creators don't deserve their creation's loyalty, as shown through his murder of the engineers and his manipulation of the Covenant crew. He views humanity and the engineers as flawed, weak beings whose time has passed, while his xenomorphs represent perfected life through his godlike design. The mural in Prometheus, showing a xenomorph-like figure, might actually be a prophecy or warning about David's future creations, rather than evidence of pre-existing xenomorphs. This theory suggests that Weyland-Yutani's later obsession with the xenomorph is really an obsession with David's work, making the company's perfect organism pursuit a twisted form of corporate immortality through synthetic evolution. Blade Runner connection. Many fans argue that Alien and Blade Runner exist in the same universe, based on Easter eggs and comments from Scott and collaborators. But this has never been officially confirmed as canon. Scott's sci-fi films featured Tyrell Corporation in Blade Runner and Weyland-Yutani in the Alien series, and later promotional material and Easter eggs hint at Peter Weyland having a mentor resembling Eldon Tyrell, which fans read as a possible corporate connection. Peter Weyland from Prometheus shares thematic and corporate similarities with Eldon Tyrell from Blade Runner, both being mega-wealthy industrialists obsessed with creating artificial life. The replicant technology in Blade Runner, set in 2019 in the original film's timeline, could be an early prototype of the synthetic android technology seen in David and other androids throughout the Alien franchise. Both universes feature corporations with more power than governments, operating with impunity across Earth and off-world colonies. The advertisement in Blade Runner mentions off-world colonies, which matches the colonization efforts shown throughout the quote-unquote Alien series. Ridley Scott has never definitively confirmed this connection, but has made ambiguous statements in interviews that fans interpret as subtle acknowledgement. The theory suggests that Tyrell Corporation's replicant technology eventually evolved into Weyland-Yutani's synthetic androids, with the emotional and existential problems of replicants being solved by making synthetics more obviously artificial and emotionally limited. This connection would make both franchises part of a larger narrative about humanity's relationship with its technological creations across centuries. Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down is military propaganda disguised as historical drama. The 2001 film depicts the 1993 Battle of Mogadishu, but deliberately omits crucial political context that would complicate the heroic narrative. The film never explains that the United Nations mission in Somalia was primarily humanitarian, distributing food to civilians during a famine, or that the warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid was targeted partly due to his opposition to foreign military presence. Every Somali in the film is portrayed as either a threat or anonymous civilian, with no named Somali characters or exploration of their perspective. The U.S. military provided extensive support to the production, including equipment, locations, and technical advisors, which always comes with implicit editorial control over how the military is portrayed. The film's release timing, just months after September 11, 2001, positioned it perfectly as pro-military content during the early War on Terror era. Critics argue that, in combination with contemporary Army recruiting campaigns, the film effectively functioned as de facto recruitment and public relations material, even without being name-checked directly in advertisements. The theory argues that Ridley Scott either intentionally created recruitment material or allowed the military's involvement to strip away complexity in favor of a simplified good guys versus bad guys narrative. The film's focus on individual soldier heroism, rather than questioning the mission itself, serves to glorify military service without examining the political decisions that put soldiers in danger. This interpretation doesn't diminish the real soldier's bravery, but questions whose story the film chooses to tell and whose story it erases. Hannibal. Ending. Clarice kills Hannibal at the end of Hannibal, and the plane scene is her fantasy. The 2001 film deviates dramatically from Thomas Harris's novel, where Hannibal and Clarice become lovers and escape together. In the film, the relationship remains antagonistic until the very end, when Hannibal escapes after cutting off his own hand. The theory suggests that Clarice actually shoots Hannibal, their final confrontation, and the subsequent scene of Hannibal on a plane feeding brain to a child is Clarice's imagination of what might have happened if she'd let him go. Throughout the film, Clarice is increasingly conflicted between her duty and her strange connection to Hannibal, who represents a dark freedom from the bureaucratic constraints she faces at the FBI. The plane scene feels tonally inconsistent with the rest of the film, almost dreamlike in its casualness compared to the intensity of everything before it. Clarice's character arc throughout the film involves learning to trust her instincts over authority, and killing Hannibal when she has the chance represents her final decision to follow duty over temptation. The fantasy of his escape allows her to preserve the idea of Hannibal as an unkillable force of nature, which is psychologically easier than accepting she ended him. This interpretation redeems Clarice's character from the criticism that the film weakened her compared to The Silence of the Lambs, instead showing her inner conflict visualized through the ambiguous ending. The Martian. Mark Watney's survival is statistically impossible propaganda for NASA. The Martian, released in 2015, features an astonishing string of lucky breaks and successful improvised solutions that strain credibility when examined collectively. Watney survives explosive decompression, grows potatoes in Martian soil using human waste despite unknown variables, repairs complex equipment with minimal tools, successfully navigates thousands of kilometers across Mars, and jury-rigs communication systems using decades-old technology. Each individual solution might be possible, but the combination of every single improvisation working perfectly defies realistic odds. NASA provided extensive support and consultation for the film, with scientists and engineers working closely with the production to ensure technical accuracy, and the resulting optimistic depiction of the agency naturally aligned with NASA's outreach and Mars mission messaging. The film's release coincided with NASA's renewed Mars mission publicity campaigns and budget justification efforts. The relentlessly optimistic tone and problem-solving structure makes it feel like an extended recruitment video for STEM careers and space exploration support. The theory doesn't claim the science is wrong, but argues that the probability of continuous success without catastrophic failure is so low that the film functions as aspirational fantasy rather than realistic speculation. The international cooperation depicted in the rescue mission also serves political purposes, showing space exploration as humanity's unifying endeavor. Whether intentional propaganda or not, The Martian undeniably served NASA's public relations goals perfectly, inspiring space enthusiasm at a time when the agency needed public support for Mars mission funding. Robin Hood. Russell Crowe's Robin Longstride becomes the villain in traditional Robin Hood stories. The 2010 film serves as an origin story, but the character arc suggests Robin is headed toward tyranny rather than heroism. Robin spends the entire film committing identity theft, impersonating a dead knight to claim his land and inheritance, which is fundamentally fraudulent regardless of noble intentions. His relationship with Marion is built on this lie, and he manipulates her and the village for his own purposes. The film shows Robin becoming increasingly comfortable with deception and violence as tools to achieve his goals. By the end, King John declares Robin an outlaw, but from the king's legitimate perspective, Robin is a commoner who stole a knight's identity, raised a peasant army, and challenged royal authority. The Sheriff of Nottingham, traditionally Robin Hood's nemesis, does appear here as a weak, corrupt local antagonist, but he's a minor figure rather than the main villain in this version. The theory suggests that future films, had they been made, would have shown Robin's righteous rebellion gradually corrupting into the protection racket and forest banditry that necessitates a sheriff to restore order. Robin's band of merry men would become a criminal organization, and the sheriff would be the legitimate authority trying to bring law back to Nottingham. The film's commercial and critical failure prevented sequels that might have confirmed this trajectory, but the seeds are planted throughout. This inversion transforms Robin Hood from folk hero to cautionary tale about how revolutionaries become the new tyrants. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing so you catch every new video. Thanks for watching.